in life was the care of all worthy things that are in peril as the world stands. I've always loved those words. The care of all worthy things that are in peril as the world stands. And it's a good thing that Gandalf had magical powers, because that's a pretty big sense of stewardship as the world stands. The steward of Gondor's sense of responsibility was for the care of one nation. And even that's a lot. But large or small, most of us think of ourselves as stewards of something. I'm the proud steward of my backyard garden, its soil and its trees. I take care of it, gardening so that the trees thrive and the soil is healthy and fertile. In this phase of my life, I'm a steward of my parents' lives. But once, of course, they took care of me. And I have a strong sense of stewardship for the church, naturally. That's sort of a professional given, but it's sunk deeply into my heart over the past 28 years. I know that almost all of you have a few worthy things that you care for. And that care is a part of your own sense of your life's mission and purpose and joy. I can tell you that because many of you told me what your work was when we blessed hands and smartphones and backpacks and other symbols of our life's work last week. You care for children and elders, for customers needing help, for prisoners, and you are healers, teachers, makers of beauty. You help out in the church garden, the botanical garden, in museums and parks around town. You might say it was your calling. You're stewards of some of the worthy things of the world. And so much is in peril. Peace is threatened. Democracy, even, it sometimes seems that basic human decency is in peril. The health of the planet is threatened by our society's addiction to polluting fuels. Our national health is threatened by a polarized political system and by politicians who would rather do harm than compromise and govern. Sometimes I just have to turn off the news because so much that I care about seems threatened. I'm not a wizard. I am neither immortal nor particularly powerful, nor even like the humble hobbits of Tolkien's tale, called out of smallness into the very center of the fray. I am one fairly ordinary American person, a mother, a wife, a minister, a citizen, a child of God. But I am also a steward, if not of a nation, nor of all worthy things, still at least of some worthy things, a few, the ones that come into my sphere. And my stewardship, my taking care of things that do not belong to me, my stewardship is at the center of my life and my values. It's how I live with some peace and joy in the face of all that seems threatened with hatred and greed and short-sightedness. It's an old-fashioned word, steward, but it means a lot to me. I want to share it with you because you too are stewards. You too care for precious things and foster precious things with your lives, and it's good to remember that. It's been almost a generation since the world's tree huggers introduced us to the now widely accepted idea that human beings are supposed to care for the earth rather than exploit it. Environmental stewardship is a mainstream term, and it means that a part of our sense of being good people comes from living somewhat lightly on the earth, recycling what we can recycle, preserving open space, and so on. We don't always live up to our values, and it seems like this is one of the places that our society has recently turned from what we wish our collective values were. But at least the concept is a part of our lives, our children's education, and our social structures. And for many of us, being a good steward means, as it meant for the steward of Gondor, that we treat the earth and its sturdy but not invulnerable systems of healing and renewal with care and responsibility, generation after generation, that we solve problems, make plans for the future, even make sacrifices for an entity that's larger than ourselves and which we will never claim as our own. And that's what good stewards do. Loyally and wisely take care of what's not their own. From the wine steward of a fine restaurant who cares for the wine, to the stewardess on the airplane, whose first responsibility, as we are often reminded, is the safety of the passengers, to the great stewardship that Gandalf claimed of all worthy things that are imperiled. Stewards care for what is larger than their own life and small interests. It's a trust bestowed upon them by the owners of the restaurant, the flying public, by God, by our own individual sense of understanding that since we hold it in our hands, we should take care of it. Parenthood is a kind of stewardship. We care as wisely and tenderly as we can for our children, all the while helping them to become their own persons, not our persons. Grandparenthood brings a kind of extended stewardship to the sons and daughters of our sons and daughters, and so does mentoring, teaching, tutoring, and caregiving. Citizenship is a kind of stewardship, which is why so many of us vote, even when it's inconvenient, even when there are no perfect options, even when we just wish the whole thing would be over with. That's why I know that many of you will go to the polls in 6 weeks, because you are good citizens, good, if perhaps discouraged, stewards of our nation. Most of us practice some forms of stewardship of the environment. Our parking lot tells the tale, as do our bike racks. Some of us, and to some extent, try not to drive frivolously. We look into fuel economy before we buy cars and appliances. We discipline ourselves to enjoy simple pleasures and resist what some have called retail therapy. We support many environmental causes. We try to use water frugally in the desert. And most of us support laws that help businesses act responsibly, even when they increase costs. We look for something larger than we are, something that does not belong to us, looking to a future that we won't be present to share. It's really very satisfying when you come right down to it. We're also stewards of the worthy organizations we belong to and benefit from, including this church. These institutions are extensions of our values and our priorities and our dreams. They are larger than we are, and they serve our lives and other lives into the future. Angela and Dan told you stories of entering ministry in the last couple of weeks, so that put me in the mind of mine, so I'll share a little bit with you. I entered ministry because I discovered as a child the crucial role a church could play in people's lives. And I learned that because it played a crucial role in mine. You see, while I was loved and wisely parented at home, neither I nor my parents could quite figure out how to help me negotiate school successfully. I was smart enough, but I just didn't do well. Just didn't have many friends, was kind of frustrating to everybody who met me, and even had some behavior problems. Later in my school life, I learned I had learning disabilities. And even later, watching my son and his cousins negotiate their schooling, I realized that the Robinson clan just grows up a little more slowly than average. And the upshot was I was miserable in school for 7 or 8 years. I struggled with what seemed like a very inhospitable world, and with adults who were mostly very impatient with me. But in Sunday school, I thrived. There, spelling, writing on the line, showing your math work didn't matter. What mattered was the willingness to talk about ideas. In Sunday school, I was a star. My teachers doted on me. They called on me to do extra fun things. chose me to speak for the class and to help them out after class was over. During my middle childhood, while my brain was catching up to the world's expectations, the community offered, knew this would happen. The community offered by the River Road Unitarian Church saved me. It offered me a sense of being competent, even gifted, in the world outside my home. You can't imagine, or maybe you can, how much that meant to me and to my parents. Can you ever repay a debt like that? Only by offering that care and community to others. I learned early also that the church can play a role in the world. Situated in the near suburbs of Washington, D.C., River Road Unitarian Church was very active in the civil rights movement during the 1960s, my childhood. I learned from watching my parents and elders that there is power when people organize to do good things together, and that the church is a platform and a container for that kind of organizing. And so, when it came time for me to choose my vocation, I cast my lot with the church, and I became one of its stewards. And I counted and count that stewardship as one of the most important works and satisfactions of my life. I know that many of you have similar stories and feelings about the church because I've heard them. And you'll get to hear some of others in these weeks of this stewardship campaign. In greater and smaller ways, we all, I hope, become more and more aware of the ways this community serves others and serves us, serves our family, serves our children. And we become more aware of the ways that our own stewardship in this and other places is an important part of our lives. We are actually rarely stewards alone. We depend on others who are also stewards. The church's leaders, its hundreds of volunteers, the many who give generously to all the programs and services, employees and materials, spaces and property that make this church what it is. It's larger than any of us, and none of it belongs to any one of us. But I cast my lot day after day with you and with those who come before and after, who over time work to make the world more fair and all her people one in this particular place, to save what can be saved so that it can thrive and grow to bear fruit in the future. Are you with me? May that stewardship then be fruitful and satisfying through all the days of our lives. You might have noticed that this was called a homily, not a sermon. That's because it was meant to be short and sweet. Sorry for all those tears, but that's the way it goes. And it was meant to give plenty of time for that party in the social hall and on the patio, which is a part of our celebration of our stewardship this morning, and our stewardship of this place that's so important to us, and the community that it gathers, and the growth and the learning and the service that it fosters, and the values that it stands for, and the people we share with it. May you be blessed by your stewardship of this place, and by our collective stewardship, may we bless each other and bless the world. I invite you now to stand and take hands for the closing words and closing song, which is